们分红两场我制度人物，身心当机，送机方面头平气，当至少我年把人上。
First of all, it is necessary to give rise to the proper motivation, and the motivation should, of course, be to be able to bring about the awakening of Buddhahood for each and every sentient being, not a single one excluded. With that motivation at heart, let us now set out to listen to the profound Dharma instructions. We heard that line of the third verse in which it says, even if you desire the true Dharma, to find an authentic guru is rare. Well, when we talk about authentic gurus or authentic teachers, there's no doubt about it that indeed there are many of them. There are many such teachers who have undergone proper studies, who have gone through the full curriculum of whatever it is that such teachers have to study and to learn and to practice, and they are authentic master in that regard, that they have fully learned and comprehended all of these teachings which they pass on to their students. However, to meet such a teacher is a rare thing, and to truly experience the kindness of such a teacher is even rarer. Therefore, it is also said that even though there are such teachers, it is rare to find one, or it is rare to perceive or to experience the kindness of such a teacher. In our various traditions, there are many such teachers, be they of the Nyingma or the Sakya or the Gelugpa tradition, or even of our own culture tradition for that matter. So teachers who are properly educated, there is no particular lack of, but to find one who is the true authentic guru for us, that is the rather more difficult thing.
KARMAPA
I forgot to say before that within our own tradition, of course, that particular teacher who is the main teacher for us all, so to speak, of whose kindness we benefit, is none other but the KARMAPA, His Holiness the KARMAPA. Now, when we talk about the KARMAPA, if we were to find out how he came by his name, how he came to be the one as whom we know him, we would have to go back a very long time into an era in which there was a king whose entire striving, whose entire activities were extremely virtuous. This king, the Tibetan name of whom is Yulkur, had a rather large number of sons, princes of that realm, and one of his sons, one of the princes of his kingdom, was known under the name of the Tibetan Chögyalodra, that would be Dharma, and he was known to be an exceptionally compassionate person. He was exceptionally active for the welfare of beings to the very best of his ability at any given time. Whatever virtue virtuous project he could possibly take upon himself in order to bring about benefit and welfare for beings, he would always joyfully do so. This young prince, Dharma was full of only the very best intentions towards all beings, and even at a very young age, he became already very learned. He was even known at a young age as a great scholar, a great pandita, and he had also familiarized himself with all sorts of skillful means which would be useful to bring about, to actually bring about lasting and efficient benefit and welfare for beings. He was constantly endowed with the recognition or the understanding that indeed all beings, not a single one included, in one lifetime or other, had been his kind and loving parents and other such relations. And with this intention, with this realization at heart, he started to think about the means to bring about lasting benefit for beings by way of establishing an inner state of awakening. To that end, he then decided to immerse himself in a stable meditative absorption which would bring about the liberation of all beings. With this intention at heart, Prince Dharma found himself a rock cave in which he sat down to meditate and train himself in one point of meditative absorption for many years. His sole intention while doing so continued to be to bring about lasting benefit and welfare for all beings and to eventually be able to establish all of these beings in the state of the awakening of full Buddha, liberating them from all suffering whatsoever. After many years of very stable meditative concentration of this sort, having completely stabilized this state, one day he beheld a vision of the Buddhas of the 10 directions, all of whom praised him profusely and who prophesied to him or said to him that it is so overwhelmingly wonderful that he trains himself for the sake of beings in this way, that in the future he ought to be known as the one who performs Buddha activity, which means nothing else, or which is the meaning of the name KARMAPA. So this is how he came about, this is how he came by his name. After having been empowered by the Buddhas of the 10 directions in such a way to be or to become the one who performs Buddha activity, literally the KARMAPA, then the Dakinis of the so-called 3 places appeared, 100,000 of them, and they paid homage to the KARMAPA. And in order to make this a significant event, they also paid an offering to him or made a present of a hair of each of their heads of him. Out of these 100,000 hairs, which each Dakini offered a single one from her own head, they wove the black crown that has become the specific trademark of the Karmapa, so to speak. So since this time he was given the black crown, which is always said to be present above the heads of the Karmapa. Since that time, since the Kinis offered that crown woven out of their own hair to the Karmapa, this crown is said to be present above the head of every successive Karmapa. However, this crown is only visible to those who have for the most part rid themselves of mental obscurations, of the influence of emotional defilements, etc., and so forth, whose mind stream has become comparatively pure. Those of us, rather more ordinary practitioners, who still find themselves very much under the influence of emotional defilements, will not be able to see that black crown, which is constantly above the Karmapa's head. To meet an authentic master like this, as it says in our verse here, Karmapaka's text, is indeed exceedingly rare. However, we find ourselves in very fortunate circumstances, in that many of us were able, many people in the West were able to actually meet His Holiness the previous 60th Rinpoche when he traveled the world, and many were also fortunate to meet in the East. Similarly, now the present 17th Karmapa, His Holiness Untitled can rather easily be met. We could either travel to India, or if we're fortunate, His Holiness might indeed, as we have heard already, come to our parts of the world next year or any other time in the future. So in this way, even though meeting such a master is extremely rare, we ourselves can count ourselves fortunate to be able to really behold such masters, to come into their presence. Karmapa continues to explain, even if you were to meet one of these authentic gurus, of course, even if you were to meet one, it is rare to obtain the instructions, the experiential instruction, as it is called here. So, as we have heard already, such teachers are rare in the world. And even if we know that there are such teachers, it is even more rare to receive instructions from them. However, again, we find ourselves in the fortunate position that we are able to meet such masters and to receive instructions from them. And if luck holds, again, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa will be able to even travel Europe next year, and he will possibly travel other places in future years, and we will be able to meet him, we will be able to listen to teachings and instructions from him. So even this is a very rare case. For us who are fortunate enough to meet such masters, this is of no circumstance. if you were to receive such instructions, it is rare to be ripened by empowerment, says KARMAPA. Which means to say that even if you might have received instructions from such a rare, authentic teacher, to receive the ripening empowerments, which make these instructions all the more efficient, is indeed even more rare than receiving the instructions themselves. However, again, we found ourselves in the fortunate situation that hopefully His Holiness the KARMAPA will travel soon, and as he will travel, as he will visit various places, for instance in Europe, he will in all likelihood also give empowerments in several such places which he might visit. So even though in general this is a rare thing, we ourselves are fortunate enough to be able to receive such empowerment if we were to go to see His Holiness the KARMAPA.
And so on the Geshe
It is said quite clearly that, particularly in the tradition of the secret Mantrayana or Vajrayana as it is known, it is of absolute necessity to receive empowerment. We might have received oral transmissions and instructions, but without the performance of an empowerment, we will not be able to swiftly proceed upon that path of practice. We will not be able to swiftly experience blessing and inspiration, which comes through practice, blessing and inspiration of whatever particular yidam or meditational deity we have received empowerment of. Therefore, having received this empowerment, which opens us for blessing and inspiration of of any given meditational deity for that matter, this is the gateway, so to speak, to swiftly and speedily proceed upon that path, proceed upon such a path, and to truly receive blessing and inspiration through whatever practice it is that we might be doing.
And then all the things and then not I also send Thomas and Ripening so on. Tenga and Chocotoji only Pelopa. And Pelopa, Naropa, and then Naropa, and Marvado Sana Japan is also taking. That is another Japan around some Tona, and send Tenga. Goes on to the Sana Tower.
In his line, KARMAPA here uses the word ripened by empowerment. He says, even if you receive them, which is the teachings, it is rare to be ripened by empowerment. So what is this ripening all about? It is said that this ripening is being brought about, or rather initiated, by way of our receiving empowerment. By way of our receiving empowerment and unbroken lineage, this ripening process is being initiated. And this means, or it has to be made sure in such a case, that we receive blessing and inspiration in an unbroken lineage, just as the lineage of our own tradition has originated with Buddha Vajradhara, who transmitted his transmissions to the Mahasiddha Chilaka, who passed it on to his students, the Mahasiddha, the Pandit Mahasiddha Naropa, and so on, through the transmission lineage down to the present day. This lineage has been continued in an unbroken way, and therefore the blessing and inspiration of empowerment has been continued in such a way, and receiving empowerment in such an unbroken lineage initiates this ripening process by way of our being present at such a ritual. So this is of extremely great importance, and this is to be taken into consideration.
temple. I want to was a simple mushiba. The temple, yes, in a young, I'm around somewhere. Total county, and suddenly, my people, romance, God. One trip, more some. The temple, my yes, Kasi woman, young, that younger, Lama, then, send, Tata, and my get one chicken, yes,
Kalachaka continues to say, even if both come together, it is rare to have a direct recognition of oneself or of one's own face. So even if both came together, of course, it refers to the two aforementioned lines. It refers to the being able to receive instructions from a teacher, and the even rarer receiving of the ripening empowerments. Now, even if one were fortunate enough to have received both of them, and indeed we have been so fortunate, then it would be considered, at least according to KARMAPA, to be even more rare that this should evolve into a direct recognition of one's own self, or of one's own mind nature for that matter. However, we have had the great fortune to have received instructions from teachers and to have received ripening empowerments. Therefore, if we were to follow these instructions and to put these into practice, then indeed, by all means, there is the potential for such recognition to occur. So in this case, it may not be as rare as KARMAPA describes it here. In the regard that we ourselves have been fortunate enough to have brought all of these circumstances together. Summarizing all the aforementioned points, KARMAPA says, your present attainment of all these rarities is not by chance, but a result of your previous aspirations. So we do indeed find ourselves in the position to be able to enjoy all of these various points, all of these various features which in the previous verses and previous words have been mentioned as being so exceedingly rare. We are fortunate enough to have been born in an eon in which the Dharma has appeared, and we ourselves have, as it is said, entered through the gate of the Dharma. We have met authentic teachers, we have experienced, we have obtained their authentic instruction and ripening empowerment, and so forth. So all of these various features, which individually, one by one, are indeed rather rare, they have come together for us. We are fortunate enough to have brought all of these together. Now, this fortunate situation in which we find ourselves is not just a chance happening. It has not just happened to us out of the blue. We were struck by some kind of lucky coincidence. It is rather more that we ourselves have brought this together through our own volition. We ourselves, in previous times, have made prayers, we have made aspirations for these things to come together. We have accumulated the merits, etc., which have made it possible in the first place that all of these circumstances have come together for us. So in this way, they're not just a chance meeting, but we ourselves have very much laid the causes for their coming together.
Tenpa Tanki, Naronson, Sami, and then there were Japsu, Dari Kova, that Jabji, and Kova tea, Kova and even Sentin Tanki, La Sambado, Ingi Muni, Sentin Tanki, Sungi, Sala, Get Toba, Gagam, Naraya, Jeva Jima, Koli, Sama, Tamuguva, Sungi, Hong Kong Choba.
Now, having been fortunate enough to having brought all of these circumstances, which each one by one in themselves are already a rarity together, now we need to do something with this. And Kamachakma advises us in the next line in which he says, now is the time to turn your back on samsara. Now is the time to turn your back on the cycle of sufferings. Now, having brought all of these fortunate circumstances together, we ought to make good use of them. And indeed, the only single destiny there is to truly turn one's own back on this cycle of suffering, which is called samsara, and to work to the best of our ability with all of our, with everything that is at our disposal, towards the goal of bringing about the awakening of all beings, not a single one excluded, into Buddhahood, to bring about complete liberation for all of these beings out of this cycle of suffering that we commonly call samsara. Simply to strive for liberation out of this cycle of suffering, to strive for the awakening of Buddhahood solely for your own sake, without taking any other beings into consideration. That would be the intention, that would be the way of going about it, of a rather lesser motivation, of the lesser vehicle, so to speak. So therefore let it be said quite clearly that simply striving for liberation only for yourself, for no one other than that, is in itself not particularly efficient. Therefore, rather allow yourself from the outset to open yourself, open your heart for that matter, in such a way as to be able to strive for the awakening and the liberation of all beings out of this cycle of suffering. Strive in such a way as to bring about the awakening of Buddhahood for all sentient beings. That would be the rather more greater motivation. That would be the way of going about it in the tradition of the so-called greater vehicle. It is said quite clearly time and again that the very essence of all Dharma consists of giving rise to loving kindness and compassion towards being, so towards all beings. So if we could bring ourselves to that point at which we would truly strive to bring about benefit and welfare for the beings with all of our striving, with all of our endeavors, then whatever Dharma activity we could possibly concern ourselves with cannot go wrong.
And then George, what the other Bella Penny, and then Kadampa, Dharma, so and then Lord John, some 2%
When the great master teacher came to Tibet and was teaching far and wide in the various parts of the country which he visited, he, for the most part, stressed the teachings which are nowadays known as mind training and bodhicitta, or the awakened or enlightened attitude, for that matter. These are the very core of the teachings of the tradition, which then after Atisha came to be known as the Kadampa tradition of those who follow the authentic word of the Buddha. So these teachings of mind training and giving rise to loving kindness and compassion, which is commonly known as bodhicitta or the awakened heart, the awakened attitude, are at the very core of the teachings of this tradition.
And Kadampa, Roju Chela, and Kadampa Tenpa, I showed Tenpa.
Within this tradition, which was founded by a teacher, there were many great masters who followed after him. And one of them came to be known as the teacher Tenpa, Geshe Tenpa.
And then Geshe Tenpa, and Kadampa, KARMAPA, Tiga Roma, living one, KARMAPA, Roma. Then Geshe Tenpa, Tiga Roma, then Geshe Tenpa, Jara. And then Geshe Tenpa, Chawasi. There is a Putowa, can't take it to Larry. And Geshe Putowa, then Roma, Dharma, Mobola, choose on then they do Larry. And just the Yapore,
Once upon a time, students of another Kadampa Geshe by the name of Kadampa came into the presence of Geshe Tenpa. Geshe Tenpa asked that student, what is the Geshe Putowa up to nowadays? And the student replied, Geshe Putowa sits among this assembly of hundreds of students and he teaches them the Dharma. About which Geshe Tenpa then said, how wonderful, folded his hands at his heart, and he said, this is very wonderful, well done.
And then young, Geshe Pushuma, can't take it to Pushuma. Pushuma, Kunda, Mobo, Yingin, Chetting, Mobo, Yingin, and the dancing to and he doesn't tell you Yapore.
Geshe Tenpa continued to ask, he said, Geshe Pushuma, what is he doing now? What are his activities? Towards which the student replied, Geshe Puchungwa is very active, erecting all sorts of representations of enlightened beings, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, etc., and so forth. And again, Geshe Tenpa was very delighted, folded his hands at his heart, said, Chapsunji, which means something like, oh, I take refuge in this master, and he expressed his great delight at such wonderful activity.
And then Geshe Tenpa can't take it. And then Geshe Tenpa told me, Gamdi, Yami Shopping, and then just the day of Yapore.
Geshe Tenpa continued to ask, what is Geshe Genpa doing? The student replied, Geshe Genpa immerses himself constantly in meditative concentration. He sits there, straight-backed, meditating, constantly practicing in this way, towards which again Geshe Tenpa said how wonderful, what a truly great master, in him I take refuge.
And Geshe Kanunga can't take it. Geshe Kanunga, to the tongue, moving to the exit. And choose what I call them there. Ujadina, Ujama, Pay. Johnson, I choose to the car home there. Sentient down somebody ninja, shoot him to Gila, Tommy, that home with some show. I choose to the dark home there.
And eventually, Geshe Tenpa asked the students about his own teacher, Geshe Kadampa. And the student replied, well, Geshe Kadampa, he sits in his room with his Dharma robe pulled over his head, and he's crying bitterly. Which the Geshe Tenpa then took off his hat and folded his hands at his heart, and said, he is truly the greatest of all of them. In him I take refuge. He be my example. He be my guide. Like him, taking the suffering of all beings into consideration at all times, this is truly the highest, truest kind of practicing the Dharma. He be my guide. He be my example. Such was the way of these early Kadampa masters, to truly take the suffering of all beings into such strong consideration even to the point of crying.
I don't know how to now. Any sentient somebody, some not talking some way.
So, question, is there anyone among us who occasionally sheds tears about the suffering of beings? Occasionally moved to tears by the suffering of beings. Would you like to come forward to demonstrate? In case you might have trouble with letting your kindness and your love for beings grow in such a way as to bring tears to your eyes, so you might come forward and give us a demonstration of how you cry for them. So even if the shedding of tears doesn't really work, you might at least come forward and give us a performance of some howling sounds. So the homework until next year is train yourself in kindness and compassion towards being to the point of breaking into tears, and then next year Rinpoche will examine the quality of your tears and your crying. Yeah, but now for real, there is no doubt about it whatsoever that loving kindness and compassion towards being is the very essence of all Dharma.
Yeah, I try.